Guys,
welcome.
Got us sleeping.
No, Tampa Fishing Outfitters Live Fishing Report, where we intend to talk about fishing
A little bit. Yep, we're going to do some of that.
That's the subject.
Yeah,
That is the topic of conversation. Well, guys, welcome for another week of Fish Talk. Tampa Fishing Outfitters Live Fishing Report, like James said. James, Travis, Rick in the house. And we're getting our comments loaded up now as soon as James learns how to use a mouse. A mouser?
You have me taking on a lot of tasks here.
You know how I get without comments.
I know.
Oh, Rick will get
For
all.
those of you that don't know, Rick just cannot function without your comments. So let's do something. Let's bombard him with comments. All right.
Today? You don't have to do that, but it's just.
I just think it makes it.
It's just interactive.
Green too.
Do you?
Yeah.
Huh. Oh, we got Bait Lives Matter.
Bait
Kevin was
Lives
pretty
Matter.
big on last week's episode. We were talking about not catching as much bait.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, good. Maybe he can actually find some on the flat. You know?
Well, what y'all said last week about chumming and not having to chum as much and all that.
Dead accurate.
That's just spot on.
On point.
You don't need near as much bait right now as you did a month ago.
Yep.
No sound? We got no sound? Hello. Do we have sound?
Hello.
Can you hear us? Can you hear me now?
As long as you can hear one of us, they can.
Can you hear
translate.
any of us? Travis.
You.
Well, fixed.
Fixed.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Keep us
All right.
posted. Keep us posted.
All right.
Ross,
Y'all hear me. Ross has got us.
All right. We have sound.
We have
Ryan.
sound. Thanks, Ryan. So anyway, guys, we'll pick off kind of where we left off last week. I think that'd be a good starting point for this week. And I think, like you just said, Rick, and we see it every year. That water temperature's starting to come up. We're starting to move into that next pattern of bait fishing and kind of fishing them fish out in a little bit deeper water, and dialing in or really keying in on those flats in the backcountry when the tides are good. Right. When that water's really moving. For me personally, oddly enough, I like the outgoing tides on the flats or in the backcountry this time of year. The outgoing tides.
To me, it depends on the wind direction because I like to match them.
Yeah, it can help me. Absolutely.
But really, either way, as long as I can get a good wind with it, I'm not real.
Is our camera dirty?
I'm not. This is.
Hang on, boys. Earthquake.
Dude, I'm not really particular about whichever one.
Camera crew.
But I do know that tides are a whole lot more important to your success right now than it was a month ago. I mean, you could just bang the snook a month ago on a slack tide, like you could if the tide was moving. Now, here the last week or so, that tide ain't moving, man. You might as well sit down, eat your sandwich.
That's the truth.
Make a couple phone calls and wait for that water to move.
I mean, you can pick them off,
but
situation, especially coming around this last full moon that we just had.
Yeah.
It really was in my opinion, was a transition moon. Things really shifted. We spent, 4 days, I guess, in Crystal River. And I want to talk a little bit about the IFA. We'll probably push that off till maybe later in the show. But, some really pretty water. We found some good fish. And between the moon and the high pressure that was sitting on top of us, crystal clear, water and high bluebird skies, it really made a tough condition to do some sight fishing or even just to get, artificial baits close to fish. And so that same pattern
lack
sort
of wind too.
Lack of wind. I mean, it was just, if you were beach or sandbarring it, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better weekend. Nope. It really was a challenge, and I think the results of the tournament, sort of show that.
Yep.
But I fished yesterday, and I know you
I was out.
Had a kind of a rough trip.
Friday, Saturday,
all together.
Sunday. Yeah. No, well, we were all. It was just. coming off of the day before the moon, which was Friday, which was a phenomenal bite. And I fished a corporate event out of Hula Bay, and the results were really good in that event. You know, everybody that came in was catching fish. It was one of those multi-species events beyond your typical flat slam. So we incorporated mackerel, flounder, grouper, and cobia maybe, and you know, a lot of boats turned in, you know, out of those, and it's a 3.5 hour window we had to fish. You know, time speaks for itself. A lot of big fish caught, a lot of big redfish, a lot of big snook. So Friday was actually really good, and bait was easy. You know, from everybody I talked to, everybody was out and getting their bait. Everybody was back, you know, ready around 7:30 to fish, even though we didn't have to be there till 8:39. And then I can tell you, Saturday and Sunday, our whole world changed. You know, bait was difficult. It didn't want to get in the chum. As soon as the sun got up, it didn't want to get together. You know, so everybody for us where we were on Saturday and Sunday, it was a grind to even get that, and then mix that with a slow tide, the full moon. It just made for difficult fishing. So
down our way, the bait's been better once you get that sun popping real good.
Yeah, not for us.
It's all pinfish until then.
And one thing, you know, one thing I'll say is that the bait is there is a lot of bait in the northern areas of the bay, but it's in small areas, right? It's on small flats, small pieces of flats. It doesn't give you that room to spread out like I know some other flats in our bay do. So what tends to happen is when you get a Friday with a big corporate event where there's a lot of guides, or a Saturday and Sunday when there's just going to be a lot of boat traffic, there's a lot of boats really close together, and there's a lot of chum in the water, and there's a lot of people throwing nets. It kind of changes how that bait reacts to it a little bit. So it was definitely tough on Saturday and Sunday for us to get that done.
I had an afternoon trip yesterday, and we got bait. We left the dock at like 11. Took them with me. Kathy had some friends in town, so we took. Bait was there. I jumped on the tower and I ran down. You know, had a little bit higher water, so I was able to actually find the bait. You know, by seeing it. And what I noticed was, and a couple guys have alluded to this on social media, but we've got a mix on the flats right now. We've got schools of threadfins, we've got big schools of Spanish sardines,
big schools,
and we've got
sardines,
you know, greenbacks mixed in with them, and then of course the pinfish. So you get this hodgepodge of bait selection on the flats, and we were able to actually at like 11:30 chum whitebait pretty easily.
Yeah.
Came right up. We hit 2 or 3 spots and, you know, loaded down the well. I actually tried to rodeo because I was like, man, this stuff's not going to chum. So I hit a couple, you know, drift. So we power pulled down, and sure enough, man,
like a magnet,
came right up,
chummed up,
balled up good, and we whacked it. But I did notice that once we got into the flats and started fishing, you know, the first couple, you know, bats of chum they fired off on, I just stopped after that, and we just were picking fish off.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like when I would chum, much would happen.
Yeah. Well, I took that advice to heart because, you know, in that tougher bite, and, you know, I ended up getting plenty of bait. Let me not say that. We had plenty of bait to fish all we wanted to fish. It just was a lot more work and a lot more throws than I'm used to, but it certainly held true, especially yesterday. The morning started real slow tide, but once we got into some redfish in the afternoon, you know, I started them on there. You know, I wanted to locate it, so I wasn't necessarily trying to activate fish yesterday with that high water.
As you were to locate
but I just wanted to see where they'd be sitting because the tide was 1.5 feet higher than I really wanted to be fishing at that particular location. So put that out there, get 1 or 2 to fire off. All right, everybody change your baits, throw them that way, and boom, 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 started hooking up. But yeah, just throughout Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there was a lot less chumming, and I think it pays off. And what I was saying to you the week before when we did last week's episode is that chumming sometimes right now, when you're not dealing with that ideal tide, can actually work against you. You know, you throw out all that bait, and boom, 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 they fire off, and then you wonder why your bait's sitting there not getting eaten.
Yep.
well, you kind of force fed them. They did their thing, and now they're moving on. They don't want to.
And we don't talk about it a lot once it happens, and that's that collision of bait and the sport fish, the snook, reds, and trout. They've got their natural feeding frenzy happening right now. And I'm of the opinion that in these crystal clear nights, full moon, the bait just crossed over the
You got your comments tonight, Rick.
And they're not directed at me.
Let me see if I pull the mic away a little bit. If that's better.
Yeah.
But what you have is you've got a natural feeding frenzy that's taking place at night,
right,
especially on these flats. You got a big bright moon, crystal clear skies, some pretty clear water. There's baits out there pushing up across the bar, and I think these fish are feeding all night. Naturally.
Set up at like 5:45, 6 o'clock, and you hear it. Like I'm trying to listen for the flickers. Instead, I'm hearing snook pop, trout pop, redfish boil.
I had some clients in that event but the group trip that we all three ran.
We all did, yeah.
And, I told you that one morning we jumped the bar early. We were in the skiff, and there was snook like blowing up behind the back of my boat. And I'm thinking, man, I haven't even thrown any chum. I lost half my bait. And these fish are just blowing up on baits. And what it was these glass minnows and fry baits just started coming over the bar, and they hadn't, I guess, yet. And, I mean, it was like
game on.
Get them. So that's where I think, we see that effect come into the chumming perspective, at least of what we do, is that.
So I mean, all that being said, some of my folks in the last couple of weeks I'm fishing more locals right now than I am people traveling. And a lot of the questions are that cut bait, live bait dilemma. And I can say that I'm still primarily fishing that live bait on the flats. And we're talking about for snook and redfish generally. But it feels like we're getting pretty close to where you really are going to need to slow things down. And
especially inshore.
And that's what I mean is primarily we're talking about the snook and redfish for the purpose of this conversation, but it feels like we're getting pretty darn close to where a box of threadies or some good dead threadies
100%.
in the cooler are going to be good to have with you. I'll say that.
Well, not only when you talk about the layer and chum before you get there, so already we are kind of in the phase where we're not chumming very much.
Yep.
And if we're the third or fourth or fifth person to a spot, which certain spots get a lot of attention, I know we all have spots that we are kind of away from not community holes kind of thing, but still, you don't know how many people have been there before you and unloaded the well on. So, I mean, there's places that we all go that if you're there first, you'll catch a fish or two or 10 or whatever. If you're there second, you'll catch a few, but if you're there fourth or fifth, you ain't catching.
No, no matter what you do.
You don't know. You don't know if what number in line you are getting there. There's a spot that I've been kind of fishing because we've been catching. We got a 30 nice, mid to upper 20 fish that I've been trying to go back, and every time I go by there now, and I'm not saying it's because I was fishing there. I don't mean that at all, but when I'm going by there now, I'm seeing a lot of people fish it. And so I just kind of took it off my rotation because when I have gone in there after it's
pull out the righty. Pull him out of rotation, Rick.
Yeah,
got to put the lefty in.
Get him out.
Took us both a second to figure. Well, I'm thinking my batteries are dead.
Well, that's old Greg McCullough hand sign there. Cut bait. So I thought you maybe.
Hey, what's this one?
That's fiddler crab.
Fiddlers. Hey, we just had a question here. There's definitely good opportunity. One of the fortunate things about this fishery is there's opportunities year-round. For those that aren't completely familiar with it, there's opportunities year-round. It's just what you target and how you target them might change a little bit.
August is good for snapper and mackerel.
August is a great snapper mackerel month. You get good kind of that bay tarpon time. I love that.
I was getting ready to fire it off.
Yeah,
man.
that's my favorite part of tarpon season.
I love
when they come in closer to me. When I don't have to go as far. So yeah.
August is all dependent on how hot it gets and how much rain we get, in my opinion.
Yep.
Because as much as you would think that rain and water temperature don't affect the bay, they're going to obviously substantially affect the inshore stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But depending on what takes place through the summer, the end of July,
sure.
Not only to the point of where the fish are going to be, but the bait and the water clarity.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have a fry bait hatch happening here real soon. And so a lot of that stuff, the August fishing is really dependent on what happens throughout the summer.
Sure.
Whether we get a major storm,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, rain,
Yeah.
A red tide event.
Yep.
All that stuff sort of plays into how that early, I would say, fall type stuff sets itself up. But historically, like you said, the mangrove snappers are really on point. The tarpon, the bay tarpon,
Mm-hmm.
post-spawn fishing is really firing off. The mackerel fishing,
cobia,
and you'll even get, like I say, those late run of cobia that are milling around the bay, and expect that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be doing.
Andre, Eric, to answer that question, well, touch on that about August.
Well, no, I'm gonna show y'all something. I'm changing subject.
All right, change it.
I'm gonna show y'all what I saw Wednesday while fishing.
Okay.
Can't take you right.
Can't take that call right now, Rick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't take that. But you guys, I've only seen this 4 times in my life.
We're gonna have to share with them too.
Yeah.
The audience.
A gator.
A gator.
Yeah.
Oh, what was the
You
deal
ain't
with
gonna
that
be able to
sturgeon
see that.
up in the Upper Bay? I was running in.
Well, we got sturgeon in Little Manatee River.
Yeah, what's crazy though is I was running in from my trip.
Was he up north?
That's at Port Manatee.
Oh, he must come out of the creek.
That's about a 7-footer, 6.5 to 7-footer, and 100 yards from shore, whatever that is. And he stayed back behind us for 45 minutes. A boat about ran him over, never saw him,
Mm-hmm.
buzzed right over, and he ducked, and they went on. And then another boat come in, got relatively close, and he just eased. They never saw him. And then when we got ready to leave the spot, I just went out there on trolling motor, and I got to about 50 feet from him. And he was going down and coming up, going down. Finally, I got probably 80 feet from him. And the last time that he let us get close, he kind of got up on top of the water and started doing this, and then all of a sudden, man, it was just like a bomb went off, and he disappeared. Yeah, and we went over, and because I bottom, and you can go right over top of them, they just lay down on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And he popped up like 100 yards. Man, he was getting it.
Gone.
Yeah. But, I mean, I've seen that 4 times in my life out there.
Well, I'd never seen a sturgeon. I ran in from
No, I'm talking about a gator.
Yeah, I know. I'm
I've only
running
seen
from
2
Upper Bay
sturgeons.
yesterday with my clients, and we run past something, and they're like, what was that? I was like, it looked like an octopus tentacle, how big it was and the shape it was in, but I was going so fast I couldn't really make it out. And then I hop on Facebook last night, and I see somebody took a picture, and they said it was just north of Gandy, which is exactly where I saw it. And, I'd never seen that before, so I saw a sturgeon.
We got him in the Little Manatee
He was
River.
floating. He was dead. He wasn't alive.
Yeah.
I've seen, to follow up with the whole gator thing, I've seen quite a few of them, and I'll tell you where I've seen them is at Cockroach Bay Boat Ramp. When I used to run out of the ramp
I've seen one
a lot.
there, but I don't really count that so much.
The ramp, and I believe that they just come out of those ponds.
They do.
They come up the creeks and get in there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's normally when we get quite a bit of rain.
Right.
They'll
we
come
had
out.
all that rain Sunday and Monday, and
Right.
this was Wednesday, so.
Yep.
And I was back in those same areas Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and kind
Never saw him.
of kept my eyes open and never saw him. So
Everybody's coming out to get the bait. Man.
everybody's kind of. I don't know if that's what he was out for, but he was definitely out there.
They got you a gator. No, not a gator trout. I mean, I got a gator.
An actual gator.
Legit gator.
Yep.
Yeah.
Eric's asking about the big schools moving up further into the bay. So it was. Let me say this: this weekend, bait was moving around. I can say that for sure. And there was a lot of it. And like I said, big congregations in small areas. They spread out obviously over the weekend, Saturday and Sunday with the full moon, and even today. I think if you're talking about out in the middle of the water, you're probably looking at thread fins and glass minnows. Those things are sprouting up in the upper bay like you wouldn't believe, which is exactly what I was seeing when I was fishing south 2 or 3 weeks ago, was out past the Skyway. Just tons and tons of schools of big threadies. Mm-hmm. Now we've got all that up in the bay. So up in the top tiers of the bay, definitely lots of thread fins. The bridges have a lot of thread fins on them right now.
I went. We did about, I don't know, 2.5 hours or so inshore yesterday, and caught, a pile of fish, really, honestly. And then I said, well, what do you guys want to do, now? And they wanted to try to get something for supper to take over to the Hook and Cook. And so I said, well, listen, we had, a pretty nice day, a little afternoon. Water was gushing out. I said, let's go run around a little. Saw quite a few triple tail. Mm-hmm. Not any that I really felt were big enough to harvest. Mm-hmm. So we just kind of left them alone. But I saw a lot of cobia. Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of cobia. We got one hooked up, and he got us in the marker and broke us off. And then saw several others from markers from, McDill all the way across to Ruskin. Mm-hmm. Every marker had bait on it, threadies, or cigar minnows or some kind of bait. Mm-hmm. Every one of them did. And I think every marker, but about 2 of them, had a cobia on them.
Is that right?
Oh, man. Now, they weren't all big ones.
Right.
But there were several in there that were studs. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how I cobia fish, some different stuff. And I know it's that time of year.
It's a wildly popular thing to do. And
there's several different ways to do it. One of the things that I like to do is pull up to an area or pull up to a channel marker or a range marker or whatever. And, obviously do the old loopy-loop. Come in, look and see if they're there. A lot of times you'll see them right in between the poles. They'll be sitting right inside the legs, or they're swimming on the outside. Mm-hmm. And so even if you don't see them when you pull up, do 3 or 4 loops around that marker, and a lot of times you'll raise them up.
See if you get curious, because they're not boat shy, a lot of them. They're really not. In fact, they get a little curious or think it's feeding time, whatever it is. So you're right about that.
So one of the things that I've sort of picked up on and done over the years to be able to get these cobia, the angler to be able to pitch a bait up under the poles, while you're up top and all that stuff. And so I always tried to figure out a way to, fish them, but not be in the, on the tower and, kind of set up on them. So what I do is I put the GPS anchor down, the Rodan down, get up current of the marker that I saw cobia on, and just start chumming it.
Yeah.
Like you would snook.
Get them eating.
And these cobia will come off the marker and start blowing up baits. We had that happen at 3 different markers where the cobia came off the poles and were blowing up baits like right behind the boat. And it's a really neat sight if you've never seen. A lot of people have seen a cobia come up to your boat and swim around, and look curious. But when you see a cobia feed, it's pretty intense.
Yeah,
that's one of the techniques that I like to use is locate the fish, get off of the marker and try to chum the fish off the poles so that you can make a presentation.
Not sit there right on top and keep throwing the same bait in front of his face, the same,
Right. Not to mention, you hook that fish in the middle of 4 poles. What are your odds of getting it out? Because the second you hook a cobia, he is going around a pole. If he's close to one, he's doing 8 laps around that pole. And so you're right. So the other side of that is, and I actually picked up some stuff tonight. James helped me pick out some good stuff hook-wise, is you can have an artificial rigged up, an eel, a hoagie. I'm actually using the salt stalkers, anything that can get their attention, and they'll normally gladly take an artificial ready. If you're going to be doing the jig fishing type stuff, have that rod ready, because you're not going to have anything if you don't have any live bait. You're going to have anything to keep that fish, entertained.
Right.
And so that mix of
and he wants that entertainment right away. He's not going to sit around and wait on you.
Well, I will tell y'all, and I
couldn't get a bait in front of it.
I told Travis this.
Oh, you're going to give it away?
No,
Give it away.
not.
That's a $5 secret.
This is a $5 secret. But I had an old timer years ago tell me, we were talking about cobia, and he said, "Let me tell you how to get a cobia." He said, "If you get to the markers and they're in those, and you don't think you can get them out," he said, "I've done this marker." He says, like 3, 4, 5. He says, those cobia will disappear, and you're just idling in a circle around that marker. He says, then drive off that marker about 40, 50 feet.
Mm-hmm.
He said, then just have your bait already ready. And he said, just drop that bait down inside the boat.
He's underneath.
They'll get under your boat and follow you as you're making a circle around the marker. And the reason you take them off the marker, so when you drop that bait and he's on, you don't have the marker to deal with.
Right.
And I've done it. It works. I'm not big on cobia fishing, but it does work. It's legit.
Yeah.
And for that type of scenario, just to add some fuel to that, I'd recommend a pinfish.
Very good.
I'd recommend a pinfish. Or
Yeah,
or a pigfish.
Yep.
Yeah, those white baits are not they're gonna want to come back up to the surface.
They're going to stay up the surface.
9 times out of 10. And so, or you can, put a split shot on, or maybe a slip sinker or something like that, a little half ounce to get it down. But a lot of guys really swear by pinfish or pigfish around markers. I know guys that they don't even look. They'll roll right up to a marker and throw a pinfish in between them and let it swim down. And that's another way to do it. But I really enjoy live bait, getting them chummed up. And the other thing that you can do is you can kind of pick the one you want.
Right.
Because at 2 spots we had 3 cobia together, and you're going to see that this time of year. A lot of times, if you see a cobia, odds are there's another one with him somewhere. They're paired up for whatever reason. Like I took to a 4-legged post, and there was 3 cobia there, happy as clams, just swimming around in circles. And I'm telling you, the lead fish, if he wasn't 80 pounds, man, I don't know what he was. He was a good one.
Well, Ray asked, were they good? Are they good table fare?
Absolutely.
Phenomenal.
Absolutely.
One of my favorites.
I don't care for them.
I think they're good.
Most people do. In fact, they're the favorite fish of a lot of people.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and it all depends on how you
stick to Spanish mackerel.
How you
prepare a mullet.
Give me a
mullet. A mullet over a cobia.
Oh,
100.
Wasn't it you that said you'd never eaten fish spread? Too? Smoked fish dip?
No, I've never said that.
Bring in the lefty.
Wait a second, though. But because one of a bone. Wasn't it you that? No, I think it was Jason.
Maybe Jason.
Yeah. Somebody had said they never eaten fish dip.
Put him in the bullpen.
Smoked mackerel fish. Oh, my God. Overrated.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Overrated. One of the best eating fish. Those are the 2 consecutive comments.
I think they're good.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, that I like to bleed my cobia when I catch them. Not that that's not an uncommon thing to do with fish, but it definitely is a fish that I like to bleed as soon as you get them. And I like, obviously, get them right on ice. Get them right on ice. And there's several different ways to prepare a cobia. You can steak them. Or you can fillet them.
I like steaks.
A lot of guys will steak them like a wahoo or a kingfish and, grill them. It's also a very popular fish to smoke, and make, believe it or not, people make dip out of cobia, I don't think you need it, but it's a very white, translucent meat.
We took him out, and he got a big cobia last year. That was a trip where, he was taking out his brother-in-law and his nephew, and we were just there to mackerel fish. And, of course, like within the first 2 minutes, he hooks that cobia, and I was like, oh, my last boat just didn't have a fish box for this side of the fish.
That must have been at that spot that Al kind of led you on to, right?
It was. And we had to catch this cobia. Took an hour because it's on 15-pound test, line, a long shank 1-aught J hook. I'm just like waiting for this. So we finally get to the boat. Didn't have a gaff. Didn't have a landing net big enough for him. So it was just disaster. Had to hip check him in the boat to get him in. Wait for him to kick me. But
so you don't have to do that with mullet.
Right. And I just had a little cooler with ice for these mackerel for these guys. And these make it go in. Fill this long fish box out with ice to get this fish in there.
Yeah.
But it was worth it. But they ate it up. They liked it.
See, just take a mullet, you run him over the rails, break his neck, and throw him in the cooler.
There you go. Yeah,
it's a funny story too, because when you're not cobia fishing, right? And to kind of clarify this, guys, a cobia has to be a pretty big fish to keep.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that, and that's 33 inches to the fork, which the fork is.
So you're probably looking at 36, 37.
You know, it's a big fish to get to that fork to make it 33 inches, and so a lot of people don't even have a cooler big enough to handle that or have enough ice or whatever. And it's funny you say that because about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even longer, I had a trip with some guys, and it was one of those like God sent trips where we got trout. You know, that's about all we're going to do. Snapper weren't in yet. I mean, we got trout, and that was about it, maybe a redfish. And so we went snook. He said, well, if not, you know, it's cool. We'll go snook fishing. But I could tell really they wanted to feed quite a few people. So we were sitting at the mouth of the river snook fishing, and in a pretty well-known spot where cobia will show up. And I'm chucking dead baits, cleaning the live well after my first trip. It was an afternoon trip. I'm cleaning the dead thread fins out. And the guy fishing on the back of the boat goes, hey,
that's a shark.
What is that thing, right? I'm like, oh, it's probably a stingray or something. He's like, nah, I don't know, you know. And, of course, I'm not even looking at this point. I'm just chucking dead ones out of the live well. And he goes, man, that thing is wild looking, you know. So I kind of lean over the side. And here's this cobia with his head sticking out of the bottom of my boat, sitting there. So, of course, I freak out. I'm like, oh, my God, dude. So I grabbed the big rod out, put a bait on. I said, watch this. I took a bait, ripped its head off, and just dropped it over the side of the boat. And boom. Hooked a cobia. Well, so I tell everybody on the boat, I said, reel up. Reel your lines up. So the guy in the front of the boat's cranking in his rod. Boom. He gets nailed. There was 2 of them. Right?
Really?
Yeah. So we got one going one way and one going the other way. Well, the one guy's on like a inshore spinning outfit. So I'm like, look, man, we're going to go after this one because you probably don't have a shot at the size of these cobia I just saw. It's probably about a 45-pound cobia. Well, this was in like 10 minutes into the trip, right? So these guys are all jacked up. You know, we go, and I'm like, I don't know what to do, guys. It just so happened to be that I was real close to the dock, so I flew in, cleaned the fish, bagged it all up. They went to Little Harbor, had a beer, came back down, and we fished cobia fishing. And that's what you're targeting, you know. Make sure you got a lot of ice.
And make sure you have a place for it. I've seen so many fish come
to
the dot with the lid can't even come close to closing. You got 20 inches of tail hanging out of the cooler. So make sure you got a fish box or something to put them in, because you're right, the ice is the deal. But Ray Wellborn, that's a good question.
What's your 3 fish?
What are your top 3 fish?
We're going to assume saltwater.
We're starting with you, Rick. Mullet.
I got mine.
No, mullet's one of those things that I love.
If mullet. There wasn't anything else but mullet and cockroaches, I'd probably eat.
I'll eat mullet sometimes over some of my favorite fish. Mullet's one of those. It's like a Coke. Sometimes you just got to have
change
a
of
Coke.
pace.
Sometimes you just got to have a mullet. You get that.
Never had that feel, but all right.
Yeah, well, I grew up eating them. So my 3 favorite, and I'm talking about bay fish, snapper, and trout. Yeah, I don't care for
really.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Snook,
trout.
I mean, I snook are good, but I think snook are overrated for taste. I think the attraction there is just hard to catch keeper.
Well, right out of the gate, mine's going to be gag grouper. We're talking bay fishing, right? We're talking about stuff that we target.
Yeah.
Because if not, then it opens up a different spectrum.
Yeah.
But I would say in the bay, my number 1 would probably be gag grouper. And then I'd probably fall down to snapper would be the next one. And then, sadly enough, I mean, if we're going to talk about it, I'd probably say snook. Because snook are really good to eat.
Well, it's not sad.
Well, I mean,
what's that about? Something about mullet and catfish? What's
mullet and sail cats?
Ooh,
yeah. I'm right there with you, Travis. I mean, I'm gag grouper. That's it. Top of the list.
Yeah. I would have to say. I mean,
top of the list. I love doing some mangrove snapper though. Like I like the convenience of it. I like the ease of catching them. There's just something about making those tacos out of those.
Yeah,
they're
pretty good.
I like to make a snapper piccata with that, with like the smaller fillets, you know. So I'm with you there, gag grouper and snapper, and then after that, give me a steak.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I'm just not big on. I'm not a big fish eater to begin with. I mean, I've enjoyed snook. I enjoy trout. I'll even enjoy a redfish, you know. But I just don't have that taste for it like I once did, to where now it's got to be something special. It's got to be a grouper, maybe. But yeah, mangoes. I love mangrove snapper.
Yeah.
And there's often times where I'd prefer the ice to make the, you know, braid it up, make fried grouper, black and redfish or black and grouper sandwiches.
Mm-hmm.
But the snapper, just I do something different with those, so I like to keep.
I pick fish that don't taste like fish.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I don't eat a lot of fish and I don't really care for anything.
That's the thing
anything
about
fishy.
a mullet. Mullet don't taste like fish.
No,
yeah,
it tastes like
worse.
mud.
Yeah,
It's got a different taste.
It sure does.
You guys, man.
Do you eat the roe sack?
I eat the yellow
Oh
roe.
yeah,
Gosh.
he's all in that sack.
Man, give me some. I won't eat the white roe.
Man,
Yellow roe.
You know, but
Dang,
to
Skippy,
extend
son.
that list, because I think
That's
this is a good conversation, especially with what's going on. You know, you still got triple tail.
yeah, mackerel.
You've got cobia. You've got mackerel. I'll throw one out there that I personally don't eat, but a lot of people do. Not something that I think our taste buds locally aren't accustomed to.
Yeah,
But the guys that fish up north, you know, the big bluefish run, they like them.
that. Yep.
And so, you know, to kind of extend that, I mean, that's another fish that if you're gonna eat bluefish,
Bob, these city slickers don't know, man.
you know, go right to bleeding that fish.
Yeah,
you
gotta
better
bleed it.
those and get them right on.
But now,
ice.
what about with mackerel? We did our mackerel cleaning episode last year, which, you know, we should probably share that episode again to get familiar, because that changed my opinion of mackerel.
Nobody even mentioned sheephead. That's
There you go.
great eating
There's
fish.
another one.
Yeah.
There's another one. A little tough this time of year,
Oh, for sure.
it's definitely table fare wise. You know, hey, I know one y'all didn't bring it up, man. And
Whiting.
that's because y'all can't catch them.
Yeah.
You know,
It's not listed on my website.
When you get on that whiting bite, hey, you pulling the lefty, son.
Yeah.
You pulling the lefty.
Bluefish stock. I love it,
What was
Red.
that during a flush? What is that?
Dustin, Pat, what are you guys doing there during a flush? Oh, a flush tide? Taking a day off, man. I don't know if you realize how hot it was like the last 3 days, but that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
A
I'm
flush
here.
tide. Well, I tell you something that I like to do.
And there aren't a lot of crabs right now.
Exactly. When the crabs start flushing, that's a
Then I'll
different
be
story. But there's something that I like to do, and I've done it, I don't know, the last 3 or 4 years. I'll normally get a trip or two in, and I'll take a couple customers out, and I'll have them go dip crabs with me at night,
Mhm.
and we'll go snapper fishing.
Yeah.
Won't even go tarpon fishing. We'll go snapper fishing. And if you go snapper, really, really big snappers,
Yeah.
they will come up and eat them, especially in some of the shallow rock piles out in the middle of the bay. They'll get with it.
Mm-hmm.
But
I just hate that current.
yeah,
Fishing snapper in that current. It's such a pain. It is worth it. I know. I've done it.
You got to sit
I
way
used
off.
to do it as a kid a lot.
You got
I
to
used
sit
to do that
way
a lot.
off of where you want to be,
Mm-hmm.
because those crabs aren't going to get down, and you don't want them to get down. You don't want to drop down.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to naturally go down. And what we'll do, I'll use a small split shot, stay way back, light tackle, and that crab will just slowly sink down to your mark, and no snappers will come up and get them. So that's something I like to do.
Yeah.
Another one for flush fishing is cobia. Cobia will come up to the surface, and they'll get around these areas looking for food. That current pushes them up to the surface,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll really get up and not to mention tarpon.
Yeah, tarpon feed during a flush tide too, here and there. But I think back to all the times catching bait, you know, during a ripping tide, and you're struggling catching bait, but all those cobia you see. And
Yeah.
I mean, like, especially when I'm out trying to get a thready, so I'm out a little closer to the bridge, throwing a net, especially on those markers. Man, I just remember being ransacked by them in those tides the last
This is
couple
the
years.
time of year if you're getting bait on markers when you pull your net up and there's cobia following it up.
Manny, you got it, baby.
West wind picked up at 4 with that big outgoing. Oh boy, oh yeah. West wind outgoing tide. Oh man.
Yep, gets a little gnarly.
Well, get used to it. You know, I tell you,
You better get on the inside of
backside
Egmont.
that island. Yeah, for sure.
don't,
End up like 2 miles out there past Egmont in that wind.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Had a
my
big
gosh, I can't wait.
3.5 miles, 2 hours and 12 minutes.
Yeah, can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Yep. And then it's usually like, you're fishing the flush tide, especially that afternoon one. So you do that, but halfway into it, it's dark.
Oh, yeah.
Those are the most fun. That's like the most fun. It's a 2-hour tarpon, outgoing tide, west wind, Egmont, and it's dark.
You know what's even better is when you're on the inside,
and you can't even see the fish either.
And you hook one at sundown. Then you got to go try back find your anchor ball.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That was just follow your track.
Yeah. Oh man.
If you've been fishing there a few days, that track doesn't look so good anymore. That track's everywhere.
On point. True. I've had that happen several times.
That track is 3 inches of.
It's funny because this conversation came up the other day when I asked you. There was a box of glow sticks you guys got sitting back over there. I asked if those were inventory or not, because I was going to get my hands on a few of those for that reason. If you are fishing at night, especially tarpon fishing, a lot of guys do, and you're on anchor and you got an anchor ball, go ahead and crack a glow stick and put it on your anchor ball. That way when you come back, you got something to be able to see.
That's a great idea.
And so I kind of learned that one the hard way, but that's just a little trick if you're going to be doing some nighttime fishing. Obviously, we rely a little bit more on our GPS anchors now, our trolling motors, but especially if you're fishing all day or if you got a double, you may run out of trolling motor battery and be on that anchor.
Yeah.
And you ball and all your anchor rod and buoy ball and all that stuff. Make sure you got your name on your buoy ball. But adding some light to it will definitely help getting back to it if you need to.
Yep.
So.
Since we're in the spirit, we talk cobia. Wouldn't be fair to not talk about triple tail. And one of the questions here is, I've never targeted triple tail. Where in the bay by the Skyway are they hanging out? What depth and lure setup is best? I would probably have some mixed opinions on this, but I like, we look at cobia. I like to look for cobia on fixed markers, and I like to look for triple tail on poles, floats, so crab trap floats, can buoys, anything that moves a little bit, has a little bit of like bait. I mean, I prefer just a regular white bait, to be honest with you. Or a shrimp will work, a thready will work, a pinfish will work,
a jig, shrimp,
an artificial shrimp will work. There's a lot of baits that work. The most important thing is finding the triple tail and being able to put a bait in front of it. I would say you just got to get out there and kind of commit some time to maybe not being so productive, but covering some ground and having a look around.
There's a couple little great points. Mm-hmm. There's a few other things to kind of add to that. You really need good conditions. If you're going to go triple tail fishing,
that's
don't do
huge.
it when it's blowing 20.
Huh.
You
want it to be glass.
Peeing in the wind. You want some high sun. You want some fairly a little bit higher tide. Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, that gets that growth in the
underwater
into the water, and that's really what those cobia or those triple tail are coming up to do, is eat off of that growth. They're a pelagic fish, so they like to be in the upper part of the water column. Mm-hmm. When the water's really low, traditionally they don't have anything to feed on, and so I like a little bit higher tide, like some decent weather for it. I'll throw a little bone out there. A lot of people think that triple tail are more Gulf side fish, right? But we have a lot of triple tail inside the bay. I was running back yesterday. Like I said, I saw quite a few triple tail. Didn't see any big ones. I think there's a few guys out there sticking all the hog legs, but there was two triple tail right outside of Little Harbor marker that marks the shoal that runs from Little Harbor down towards Simmons Park. There's a little bitty, and it's only maybe 10 foot. There was two triple tail sitting in the middle of that pole. They were probably 13, 14 inches. I mean, they were little guys, so we didn't even bother them. But I drove around the marker 5 or 6 times, and they just sat there and, played around, never even moved. So a lot like cobia, I would say if you can dial in cobia and you can figure out how to cobia fish, you're going to stumble.
A lot of the same logic.
Exactly. You're going to stumble across triple tail.
Can I give away the other secret that you and we fished
Getting them off the poles?
Getting them off the poles.
Just like the cobia.
Yeah, just like the cobia, same way.
Yep. So, if you do find a triple tail, a lot of times I like to run and gun. Cobia fishing and triple tail fishing to me is a run and gun thing. There's another part to that is you may run a whole bank of markers or a whole string of crab buoys and not see a single thing. Turn right back around and go right back down them because you may see every other one might have one on it. They're going to come up and go down, but they're also moving.
They already are on that marker.
They're moving.
They're on their way right now,
up and down the bay, and so what they do is they find these points. These objects to get under, and they'll get up under it. So
Andre said next weekend there's going to be 10 boats on that marker.
Yeah, they'll be bumping into each other for 2
for two little shorties.
Yeah.
But to give you an idea, that's some of the places you're going to want to look.
Yeah.
What's the size limit on triple tail?
Don't keep them. Don't even fish for them.
I don't.
18 or 19 now?
I don't fish for
18.
18 I was going to tell him was, he said the Skyway in particular. So I think everyone does get a little wrapped up into the buoys. Like, I got to find buoys. I got to find crab traps. When you're dealing with these big tides that we get during these months, especially flush tides or big incoming tides that we get in these mornings, don't be afraid to check on, like, especially on the way to the tarpon grounds or whatever you're going to go do. Look for these big patches of grass that these crabs like to flush out with, and don't be surprised to find some good 18. Yeah, it was 18. But don't be surprised to get in there and in that grass and just go along that line and see that triple tail. They act a little bit differently because they're undercover, so I like to stay off a little bit further away.
Yeah, and they'll lay up on top on their side.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind, too. If you find big patches of grass, I usually like to say especially Anna Maria, Egmont, in that area, you'll find a lot of them in the grass as well.
And they stretch, like I said.
What's up, Daryl?
Up the bay.
He went up to you, said, all right, I'll wait till I'll get them next year. Give them 4 more inches.
There you go. Yeah, it used to be 15.
Yep.
And so I think, as far as regulations go, I think that's a good move in terms of FWC's part in regulations to bump those fish up. Obviously, there's opinions on that, but a 15-inch triple tail, you really don't get a lot of meat off it. So it's more valuable to our fishery to just let that fish go ahead and get a little bit bigger.
Dustin, one thing, man, if you're not doing it, a fly is like a really cool way to fish for them. I'm sure you've done it, but for anybody out there that does fly fish, it's a fun fish and they don't fly. They're fun, especially if you want to catch and release them, man.
I can tell you stories. We talk about cobia and we talk about triple tail, and one of the common things, if you've done it and you've been around them, they're very inquisitive fish, and for lack of a better term, they're kind of dumb when it comes to coming up to you, and eating a bait. Even triple tail.
Triple tail too.
I don't know about triple tail.
I'll tell you a story. My uncle lived in Islamorada. My tournament partner Josh, he got to move down there when he was 13. He got to grow up in the Keys from Apollo Beach, and so my whole childhood we went to the Keys a lot. And he ran an offshore boat, and I honestly couldn't tell you the amount of times that we backed down a 31-foot sport fish, Bertram, onto a pallet or grass or something floating out in the bay or in the Atlantic, and we backed down with a long dip net and dip net triple tail right off the structure because they're not going to leave.
Yep.
And they're that stupid, for lack of a better term. They get very comfortable and they feel like they're hiding. They'll lay on that pole and turn sideways, and they think
it's
they're
all right, dude. We're good.
You know,
they can't see us.
They can't see us.
Yeah.
You know, I will say though,
they think I'm a pole.
There's some poles out there that'll get you.
Oh yeah.
And what happens is you know, a lot of these poles that they're putting in now,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
They got the plastic,
yeah,
right, and so they wrap them in plastic to keep the growth off of them. Well, if that plastic unwraps a little bit and you get this little flag that kind of hangs out and it grows on it, you'll bust a Yui and you'll take a double take if you're looking.
Look at that comment. Have you guys noticed this popularity spike in triple tail fishing the last 5 years?
Yeah.
I didn't know. I wasn't.
Yeah, it's a lot of triple tail fishing in the 80s.
I would say in the last 18 months to 2 years is the big boom in triple tail fishing.
We didn't see a lot of triple tail for a long time, and I think it's because maybe they did get overfished back
I think water quality had a little bit to do with it too.
Late 80s, early 90s, man, there was a lot of people fishing triple tail.
We used to get them in Apollo Beach. I can remember going out towards the power plant and getting cobia, triple tail, like on the markers coming out of the channel, the old markers, not the new, but the old markers that used to come out of the power plant. We used to get them there, and they also used to get on the metal wall, Apollo Beach, on the Pico Big
the one
Bend.
that separates the discharge from the.
Yep, they sure did.
Back there.
But anyway, it's a good fish, easy fish to target. A tower is definitely going to give you an advantage when you're doing both of those fish, whether it's cobia or triple tail. You're going to have that advantage by being able to locate those fish ahead of time, not having to get up on top of them and be able to present a bait or know they're there. So even if you put a cooler on the front of your boat, give you just a little bit more perspective to be able to see those fish. I will say that if you're out by the Gulf, find a crab trap string.
Yeah.
Anywhere from 1 to 3 miles off the beach, and normally those crab trap strings will run north and south along the beach, and they'll be in a depth. They set their traps on a certain line, and a lot of times what you'll do is you'll get out there and you can run out there blind, find it, and you'll find the next one, and then go to the next one, and go to the next one.
You can also cover what seemingly can be a fish you have to cover a lot of ground for. You can kind of say, I'm just going to use this plot right here and run the next 2 miles and then run it back. So that's a really good point. I like that in the Gulf, especially when stone crab's getting started.
And that just dwindled down.
Yeah.
So that whole fishery sort of maybe non-existent. I'm sure there's some stuff out there still. So maybe even some deer lick traps out there. But that's another way that you can get them. But you're gonna want to look for structure or floating debris. Find a pallet. You find a bucket, anything.
A boat.
They will definitely, if they're in.
Rick's boat has some good growth on it. So if you see Rick floating
not
up.
growth. It's just
camo.
Camo.
I know.
There's no growth.
Oh, it is. I'm trying. Travis like in between. I just cleaned the scum line off mine yesterday.
Yeah. Leave it. Leave it.
Yeah.
So funny. I always get the biggest kick to clean my boat the best when I'm at my most exhausted point. That's when I feel like I'm at the ramp. It's like 7:30 at night. Been boiling hot all day and just get this kick. Like I want to get all this crap off my boat.
It's good camouflage here, man.
So anyway, guys.
Speaking of table fare.
Let's go
get some. But before we go, we got our seminar Wednesday. I know somebody mentioned it. Shane, it sounded like you were going to try and come out, but anybody who can get out this Wednesday, so 2 days from now, the 22nd. The 22nd at 6:30 here at Tampa Fishing Outfitters, we're going to do a seminar. You can thank Facebook. I knew sale popularity.
100% right,
100%.
Nick.
But so we got a seminar. We're going to talk some tarpon fishing, answer any and all questions, and really kind of talk about how we get on these fish. So,
and if you're new to tarpon fishing, this is a good opportunity. There's a lot of seminars that are held all over the place for tarpon, right? The one unique thing that I would say about seminars that we do here, we can walk you right over to the shelf, pick out the product that you need, and get you set up right then and there. Whether it's tackle, whether it's equipment, charts,
leader,
hooks, all that stuff we can help you out with. So, get your questions put together. And we'll do our best to get them answered for you. Like I said, I think it's just going to be me and James. I think, Rick, you're already
I'm out of town, baby.
Rick is spoken for. Jason's out.
Are we going to have food and drinks?
You can bring some.
You can bring some?
Yeah, I'm not going to have any. I'm not bringing any.
Okay, well. Bring your food and drinks.
Yeah. Bring some food and drinks,
tarpon questions.
Yeah.
So.
Actually, I'll be coming with the boat. I got a trip, and I got to clean up and head over afterwards. So there might be some stuff in the cooler.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I like it.
First come, first serve on the cooler stuff. All right, guys. Thanks, Daryl. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everybody else who watches.
Guys.
Don't hesitate to give us a share. Go over and follow the YouTube page, too. We broadcast there. But till next week, same place, same time next Monday.